her trusty teacher's pen. She marked up her edits. She sent it back. Here's why.
I think mostly I was appalled by the just random capitalization of words that typically aren't capitalized.
If the president, was writing in your class, what grade would you give him on his composition?
I just don't see that I could give him over a D. I know 100% that he did not write this, but the signature is his, and the buck stops somewhere.
For the record, the federal government style guide says that the White House correctly capitalized the words nation, federal, and state in the context of that letter. But this, Kimberly, was picked up hugely by every media and the mainstream media. Isn't it just another example of seizing on something that they could use to criticize Trump? Trump's stupid. He can't, he has bad grammar, etc.
Haters gonna hate. That's what this is about. If you don't like him, you're going to find it. You're going to correct that. If the same letter went out from the Clinton White House or whatever, from the Obama White House, you wouldn't be seeing this going viral with the corrections and the edits and the whole deal. I mean, I don't know. Look, she had some fun with it, I guess. People seem to like it. It went viral. But, you see what's behind it, the impetus behind it, which is just to try to humiliate and cheapen the presidency.
That's exactly what it is. Exactly what it is. And yet the personal pronoun I is used a lot, and she criticizes that. Is that a fair critique?
I think it's legit. I mean, I've defended this president on a lot of stuff. We all know. But I can't defend him on the grammar and the punctuation and the misspellings. It drives me crazy, Geraldo. I'm a stickler for all that stuff. My mother's an educator. My father's in education. And I read these tweets, and it's just gobbledygook. I get it. He has a great brain, and he went to the best schools. But I don't understand why that doesn't come across in the Twitter. And he speaks properly. He just can't write properly. Apparently, the New York Times said that he does misspellings on purpose. So he's like one of the folks. I don't know if I buy that, but it drives me nuts. I think he needs to clean it up, and that would be my advice. Make it work.
George W. Bush was charming sometimes in his lack of sophistication.
You're so mean.
Oh, yeah. He loved to make fun of himself. He used to say that he had a lot in common with immigrants who had assimilated in America and become citizens because he said English was my second language, too. Little known fact, while I was waiting for my security clearance right after 9/11, and I was going to the Justice Department, I worked in the correspondence office of the White House. And it used to drive me crazy to capitalize nation, state, and federal because everything I knew from AP style was that you don't do that. But in the federal style guide, that particular part of it is correct if you're going by that.
Would you opine on the extent this thing was circulated? And
I'll tell you why
promoted?
It was circulated. There's so much good news going on. I love this story because it's not ISIS. We haven't done an ISIS story in ages because our president helped destroy ISIS. So if this lady can have her fun, marking stuff up and impressing her friends, that means things are going pretty well. If this is leading, if this is on CNN and where it was, that means our economy is growing. ISIS is dead for now. North Korea looks like it could be happening. There's so much good news. This is all they got.
We're winning. Yeah, people feel good about themselves by putting other people down. Seems to be the case.
And yet they lost sight of what the letter was about. Nobody mentioned. CNN didn't talk about the fact that this was the Parkland school massacre. And they're talking about capitalizing federal and nation and stuff.
They're so missing the point.
One more thing is next.
Exclamation point.
I want something just like this.
All right, one more thing. My podcast's up. It's with John Tamney. We talk about the end of work. It's very exciting. FoxNewsPodcast.com. Let's go to this. Griggs, that's adorable. All right. This is just adorable. Take a look at this. A young boy, here he is, attempting several times to get President Trump to hug him. 7-year-old Jordan McLean, and he says, and then Donald Trump says, and then he gets a hug. Yeah,
that's adorable.
Yeah, he is the greatest president that has ever lived, and I predict will ever live.
He's the greatest hugger.
Yes. All right.
He's the blondest president.
Yes. Dana.
All right. Browns defensive back Demarius Randall wagered on Twitter that he would buy a jersey for every fan who retweeted his post that said, that if the Cleveland Cavaliers upset the Golden State Warriors in the NBA Finals, they're going to get this jersey. Well, the post went everywhere, and now he's on the hook for over $70 million worth of jerseys if Cleveland can take down Golden State. So I don't know if that's actually going to happen.
Again,
Good sports talk there,
again,
Dana.
the danger of Twitter.
Jesse?
All right, remember we brought you last week the Russians slapping each other in the face for sport?
hated it.
brought that.
Terrible.
Well, they have something else that's pretty nuts over in England. Let's roll this. These people
rolling.
chase cheese
Yes.
down a hill. The cheese is rolling down at about 70 miles an hour, and men and women, I guess, hurl themselves down this. You've done this.
Yes.
That explains
Cheese rolling has
a
been
lot.
around for 20 years.
Right, so there you go. And there's the winner. And he didn't even win any money. He just won the cheese.
So you just get to eat the dirty cheese?
Did he cut
That's
it?
right. Oh, Dana.
Oh my God!
Inappropriate. This is a
What?
family
So
show.
inappropriate.
Dana, I hope
What's wrong
every
with you?
outlet picks that up.
Unbelievable.
She made
Right.
a flatulence joke.
Yeah. It's like
And then I did not make that joke.
No, it was Dana's corny joke.
I hope you don't have some kind of weird animal video.
Oh, how did you know? Who's against pandas? Absolutely no one. Look at this. I mean, I can't even stop thinking about it. It's so cute. It's a little baby panda born in a Malaysian zoo 5 months ago. Finally made her public debut on Saturday. The female panda, who has not yet been named, come up with a good name, is the second offspring of giant pandas Liang Liang and Jing Jing. The healthy cub weighs 19.8 pounds. Could you imagine that? So it's very cool, and they've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars on a panda complex, and that's why we have this great production
They're
of a
very
gorgeous,
angry animals.
gorgeous panda. They're not angry.
They don't
they're
even
very
like
sweet.
each other. That's why they don't mate.
Exactly.
Okay, you're just
Pandas don't
not.
mate.
You're not very
How do they
nice. By the way,
procreate?
according to the World Wildlife Fund, there are 1,864 pandas, and there I am with Charles Payne, Fidel Payne. There he is. I'm going to be on with him tonight on Making Money at 6:30 to talk also about criminal justice reform.
Excellent. Mr. Geraldo.
I was going to talk about LeBron being the greatest basketball player, maybe the greatest athlete ever to live, but I'll do that maybe tomorrow night. If you have not yet bought your present for Father's Day, may I humbly suggest The Geraldo Show, a memoir on sale, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, wherever books are sold. Next Tuesday, I shall be in Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, at the Media Theater for the Performing Arts in Media, PA. 7 p.m. Tuesday, June 5th. Love to see you there.
You're doing a book signing?
A book signing, and you get a book and a signature and get to hear me speak.
Very nice
right.
Father's Day
Set
present.
your DVRs. Never miss an episode of The Five. He has so much to share. His name, Bret Baier. Where are you, Bret? There you are.
You're so good. Thanks, Greg.
You're
Frustration over the Russia investigation leads to more presidential angst over his attorney general. Roseanne Barr blames Ambien for that tweet that killed her TV show, and why Ukraine's security service faked the death of an exiled Russian journalist. This is Special Report. Good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Bret Baier. President Trump is once again expressing buyer's remorse over the selection of his attorney general. The president tweets that he wishes he would have picked someone other than Jeff Sessions. It is a continuation of the president's frustration over Sessions' recusal from the Russia probe. The Twitter outburst comes as the president sends his #1 diplomat into a very important meeting with the top North Korean official in New York. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts starts us off from the North Lawn tonight. Good evening, John.
Brett, good evening to you. And just moments ago, the Secretary of State Mike Pompeo issued a tweet saying, looking forward to meeting with Kim Jong-chol in New York to discuss President Trump's potential summit with Chairman Kim. We are committed to the complete, verifiable, and irreversible denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Around here at the White House, they keep using the word potential to describe the summit, but they are proceeding as if it is in place for June the 12th. President Trump met with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo today, a strategy session ahead of Pompeo's meetings in New York with North Korean Vice Chairman Kim Jong-chol, a prelude to President Trump's possible summit with Kim Jong-un.
We're continuing to prepare for the meeting between the president and the North Korean leader. As the president says, if it happens, we'll certainly be ready.
The White House says both its teams dispatched to Singapore and the DMZ over the weekend have been engaging with North Korean delegations.
The advance team led by Deputy Chief of Staff Joe Hagan met with the North Korean team in Singapore earlier today. The U.S. delegation led by Ambassador Sung Kim met with North Korean officials earlier today as well, and their talks will continue. So far, the readout from these meetings has been positive.
As he toured events at his presidential sport and fitness event today, the president contrasted the improving relations with North Korea by taking another swing at his Attorney General Jeff Sessions. After Congressman Trey Gowdy said this morning he understands the president's frustration that Sessions recused himself in the Russia investigation.
If I were the president and I picked someone to be the country's chief law enforcement officer and they told me later, oh, by the way, I'm not going to be able to participate in the most important case in the office, I would be frustrated too. That's how I read that is Senator Sessions, why didn't you tell me this before I picked you? There are lots of really good lawyers in the country. He could have picked someone else.
The president tweeted Gowdy's entire quote about picking someone else for Attorney General, adding in his own words, "And I wish I did." The New York Times today reported that Special Counsel Robert Mueller is looking into a March 2017 meeting President Trump had with Sessions at Mar-a-Lago, a meeting at which he reportedly asked Sessions to reverse his recusal. Sources familiar with the investigation tell Fox News Mueller never spoke about that meeting to the president's attorneys. But in his list of questions for the president, Mueller was clearly interested in the issue, asking, what did you think and what did you do regarding AG Sessions' recusal? And what efforts did you make to try to get him to change his mind and reverse? While the president was in lockstep with Gowdy over Sessions, he was at odds with the congressman over Gowdy's assertion that the FBI did nothing wrong by dispatching a confidential informant to get close to several members of the president's campaign.
I am even more convinced that the FBI did exactly what my fellow citizens would want them to do when they got the information they got, and that it has nothing to do with Donald Trump.
Press secretary today said, not so fast.
The president still has concerns about whether or not the FBI acted inappropriately, having people in his campaign. And certainly the president has concerns about the overall conduct of the FBI when it comes to this process.
And to prove that just about anything can happen here at the White House, reality television star Kim Kardashian strolled across West Executive Drive and into the White House late this afternoon. She is here for discussions with Jared Kushner on prison reform. She is also advocating for a pardon for a great-grandmother who has been imprisoned on a nonviolent drug charge since 1996. Also spotted at the White House today, Rudy Giuliani, who told the press that he has been conducting prep sessions with the president evenings this week at the White House in the event the president does decide to sit down with Robert Mueller. Brett?
A different Trump-Kim summit tonight. John, thanks. Some courtroom action to tell you about tonight in the Russia probe. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is here with details on a warning to one of the major figures involved. Good evening, Catherine.
Well, thank you, Brett, and good evening. A federal judge warned Michael Avenatti today, the lawyer for film actress Stormy Daniels, that he'll need to stop his publicity tour if he wants to continue participating in the case. As he entered the Manhattan courthouse this morning, the president's personal attorney, Michael Cohen, did not talk to reporters. Inside, his lawyer argued that the release of Cohen's bank records by Avenatti amount to, quote, a drive-by shooting of his client's rights. Avenatti said he did nothing improper and suggested Cohen's team is illegally leaking recorded conversations connected to Daniels. While there's no independent evidence to support the claim, Avenatti told reporters the tapes should be released so the public can decide.
Their importance relating to the president and what he knew and when he knew it, and what he did as it relates to conspiring with Michael Cohen to commit one or more potential crimes.
Federal judge set a June 15th deadline for Cohen's lawyers to finish reviewing 3.7 million files seized during a raid earlier this year, Brett.
Kevin, the Republican chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee also leveling some new and serious allegations tonight.
Well, that's right. Writing to a Senate Democrat, Chairman Chuck Grassley questioned the accuracy of testimony given by the co-founder of the firm behind the Trump dossier. In August, Fusion GPS co-founder Glenn Simpson told Senate investigators that his firm's work on the Trump dossier ended in November 2016. Grassley writes, quote, that was extremely misleading, if not an outright lie. Contrary to Mr. Simpson's denial in the staff interview, according to the FBI and others, Fusion actually did continue Trump dossier work for a new client after the election. That new client was Daniel Jones, a former staffer for Democrat Senator Dianne Feinstein. According to Grassley, Jones and his firm hired Simpson to continue the Russia research so that it could be shared with Capitol Hill, the FBI, and the media after the election. Neither Jones nor Simpson responded to Fox's questions today. Grassley said their statements are covered by the federal statute that makes it a crime to lie to federal investigators. Brett.
We'll follow all sides. Catherine, thanks. President Trump and his Mexican counterpart are once again going at each other over the border wall. And who's paying for it? This was the president last night in Nashville.
In the end, Mexico's going to pay for the wall. I'm just telling you. I'm just telling you. All right? I don't want to cause any problem. But in the end, Mexico's paying for the wall.
And this is the response from the Mexican president, Enrique Peña Nieto. No, Mexico will never pay for a wall. Not now, not ever. Sincerely, Mexico, all of us. The effort to bring down the political wall between the U.S. and North Korea seems to be progressing tonight. As John Roberts mentioned in his report, Secretary of State Pompeo will meet shortly in New York with a top advisor to Kim Jong-un as negotiations to revive the canceled summit June 12th continue. Correspondent Rich Edson has the latest from the State Department.
The American Secretary of State and the North Korean Vice Chairman. They're in New York, the highest level official North Korean visit to the United States in 18 years.
The conversation is going to be focused on denuclearization of the peninsula. That's what these ongoing conversations taking place now will be centered on, as well as this summit that would take place in Singapore.
The administration says Secretary Pompeo will join Vice Chairman Kim Yong-chol for dinner tonight. Tomorrow, a day of meetings to set up a summit between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. The secretary and Kim Yong-chol have met twice before, when Pompeo traveled to Pyongyang as CIA director and then later as Secretary of State.
They've had obviously very deep conversations where they've talked about a lot of detail about what the United States expectations are.
Kim Yong-chol is immersed in North Korea's recent diplomacy, joining Kim Jong-un for meetings with the presidents of China and South Korea. He spent several years leading North Korea's intelligence service and is still under U.S. sanctions. He's suspected to have been involved in North Korea's nuclear program, the sinking of a South Korean ship in 2010, and even the hack of Sony in 2014. The State Department says Secretary Pompeo spoke over the weekend with foreign ministers from South Korea and Singapore, and he's scheduled to meet next week with the Japanese Prime Minister in Washington. North Korea is also planning with its allies ahead of the June 12th summit in Singapore. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is scheduled to travel to North Korea this week. Kim Jong-un has met twice in recent weeks with Chinese President Xi Jinping, as the Trump administration's relationship with China is showing renewed strain. Secretary of Defense James Mattis promises the U.S. will continue sailing through disputed international waters China considers its territory.
There's a very steady drumbeat of freedom of navigation operations. You'll notice there's only one country that seems to take active steps to rebuff them or state their resentment of them.
The Trump administration also says it is moving forward with tariffs on Chinese imports and restrictions on Chinese investments. To that, China's foreign ministry has responded that it does not want a trade war, but that it's not afraid of fighting one. Brett?
Rich Edson, live at the State Department. Rich, thanks. Well, what do you think? Do you think the summit will happen June 12th or some other time? Let me know on Twitter at Bret Baier. You can use the hashtag special report or on Facebook at facebook.com/Bret Baier SR. A fascinating story tonight out of Ukraine. It involves the revelation that the reported murder of an exiled Russian journalist was actually staged. We learn why this evening from senior foreign affairs correspondent Amy Kellogg.
It was a stunning revelation.
I'm still alive.
Turns out crusading journalist Arkady Babchenko was not assassinated Tuesday night. Ukrainian security services said his killing had been staged to stop a murder plot ordered by Russian security services on Babchenko.
For this job, a man H offered to one of his friends a $40,000 fee to commit a terrorist act, the killing of Russian journalist Arkady Babchenko.
Babchenko had been in on the sting operation to fake his death. His wife apparently was not.
Separately, I would like to apologize to my wife for the hell she has had to go through the past 2 days. Alechka, forgive me, please. I also had no choice about this.
People had already been paying tribute to the 41-year-old journalist who fought in Russia's 2 Chechen wars before becoming a war correspondent highly critical of Russia's involvement in eastern Ukraine and Syria. His opinions led to a campaign of harassment against him in Russia. No longer feeling safe in his homeland, Babchenko and his family moved to Ukraine last year.
I have attended funerals for colleagues and friends many times, and I know this feeling when you have to bury colleagues. Sorry for this.
Russia issued a statement that it was glad to hear Babchenko was in fact alive, but the Foreign Ministry spokeswoman said the staged murder was done for, quote, propagandistic effect. Ukrainian security services say they have arrested the local organizer of the murder plot and are questioning him. And Ukraine's president, Petro Poroshenko, has ordered protection for Babchenko and his family, saying, quote, it's unlikely Moscow will calm down anytime soon. Brett.
Amy Kellogg in Milan. Amy, thanks. Roseanne Barr is back on Twitter. She is blaming medication for that tweet that prompted ABC to cancel her highly rated TV show. Fox News media analyst and host of Fox's Media Buzz, Howard Kurtz, looks at how social media can lead to disaster, no matter who you are.
Everyone has an opinion on ABC's cancellation of Roseanne Barr's show, in which she plays a dogged Trump supporter. And today, the president himself joined the fray. Rather than assess Barr's racist tweet likening former Obama aide Valerie Jarrett to an ape, the president tweeted that Disney CEO Bob Iger called Valerie Jarrett to let her know that ABC does not tolerate comments like those made by Roseanne Barr. Gee, he never called President Donald J. Trump to apologize for the horrible statements made and said about me on ABC. Maybe I just didn't get the call? This followed a bizarre tweet storm overnight in which Barr ripped her critics, apologized, and blamed a sleep medication. Guys, I did something unforgivable, so do not defend me. It was 2 a.m. and I was Ambien tweeting. It was egregious, indefensible. That prompted the drug's manufacturer to declare that racism is not a known side effect of any Sanofi medication. Now, some Roseanne fans say HBO should boot Bill Maher for once jokingly comparing Trump's hair to an orangutan. Twitter can be a treacherous tool for anyone in public life. CNN fired host Reza Aslan for tweeting that Trump was a piece of S and an embarrassment to humankind. CNN also fired pro-Trump contributor Jeffrey Lord for tweeting the Nazi salute, Sieg Heil. But ESPN took no action against former SportsCenter co-host Jemele Hill for tweeting that Trump is a white supremacist. She was later suspended for suggesting the Dallas Cowboys be boycotted over player protests. MSNBC did not discipline host Joy Reid for decade-old homophobic tweets she admitted were dumb and hateful. Trump's tweeting has also drawn flack, from mocking MSNBC's Mika Brzezinski for a supposed facelift to yesterday's unproven charge that Robert Mueller is meddling with the midterms. But he also punches back against vicious criticism. Twitter erupts in anger so quickly that offenders can lose their jobs and their reputations within hours. As Roseanne Barr just learned, even having TV's most popular show doesn't protect you. Brett?
Howie, thanks. First Lady Melania Trump says she is doing just fine after being treated for a kidney ailment. She's been out of the public spotlight for a few weeks. She said on Twitter today, quote, I see the media is working overtime, speculating where I am and what I'm doing. Rest assured, I'm here at the White House with my family, feeling great and working hard on behalf of children and the American people. Up next, President Trump goes after Chicago's mayor over violence in that city. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 46 in Charlotte, as authorities allowed 2,000 people evacuated in the North Carolina mountains because of worries of a dam there possibly breaking, to return to their homes. Emergency managers had said the Lake Tahoma Dam was in danger of imminent failure. Heavy rain from what was subtropical storm Alberto triggered landslides at the dam and along Interstate 40, which was closed near Asheville. WDRB in Louisville, as fire department officials in Lexington say damage was minimal in an explosion that rocked a UPS freight hub, sending 8 people to the hospital. They say this morning's blast included a small fire in that facility. And a live look here at Dallas from Fox 4. The big story there tonight, Governor Greg Abbott of Texas reveals his plan to address that state's school safety. Abbott's proposal centers on having greater law enforcement presence in schools. He wants schools added to regular patrol routes and rooms located at the schools where officers can take breaks or fill out reports. That's tonight's America's election headquarters tonight. Republicans are looking at Montana as a possible pickup in the U.S. Senate this fall. The incumbent Democrat has provoked the wrath of President Trump, but it remains to be seen which Republican will be the nominee there. Correspondent Dan Springer looks at the field tonight.
Two-term Montana Senator Jon Tester landed squarely in President Trump's crosshairs when he sank the president's personal doctor's nomination to head the Department of Veteran Affairs. One of the Republicans running in the primary in hopes of unseating the Democrat Tester is combat veteran Troy Downing, who served 2 tours in Afghanistan.
He used unsubstantiated claims to ruin the reputation of somebody that never had the chance to sit down and be asked hard questions.
Downing, a political outsider and businessman, compares himself to President Trump, who crushed Hillary Clinton in Montana by 20 points. But all 4 Republicans running in the primary embraced Trump and most of his policies. The best known among them is State Auditor Matt Rosendale. He's endorsed by Senators Ted Cruz and Rand Paul and has the financial backing of GOP heavyweights Club for Growth and FreedomWorks. But Rosendale, who moved to Montana from Maryland 16 years ago, is accused by opponents of being a carpetbagger, a label he dismisses.
I've hauled sugar beets from the fields, and I have worked cows in the fall beside my neighbors, and I've driven steel T-posts into the parched earth after a prairie fire's come through.
Former state legislator and retired district court judge Russ Fagg is attacking Rosendale for his opposition to the death penalty. Fagg would even like to see it applied when illegal immigrants are caught smuggling meth and heroin.
99% of it, at least, comes across the border illegally with these Mexican gangs. That's the problem I'm trying to address. And one of the tools that we need to use to address it is the death penalty.
Rounding out the field is orthopedic surgeon and state senator Al Olszewski, who just wants to defeat Jon Tester.
All 4 of us have the opportunity to win against Senator Tester as long as we can play our strengths.
Boosting the Republicans' hope of picking up the Senate seat here in Montana is the fact that the Green Party is also running a candidate against Jon Tester in November. And while he still has plenty of campaign cash on hand, Tester is spending a lot of it in the wake of the feud with President Trump. Brett?
Dan, thank you. President Trump is once again asking what is going on in Chicago. The president bringing that up, the city's sky-high crime rate during his speech last night in Tennessee. It comes following another violence-marred holiday weekend in the city. Correspondent Matt Finn is in Chicago tonight.
You take a look at a place like Chicago. What the hell is that mayor doing? What is he doing?
At a rally in Nashville, President Trump takes his latest jab at Chicago's Mayor Rahm Emanuel for the city's violent crime problem. The president's attack on Emanuel comes less than a week after he tweeted about the Chicago Police Union protesting against Mayor Emanuel for being anti-police. The president tweeted, "The killings are at a record pace, and tough police work, which Chicago will not allow, would bring things back to order fast. The killings must stop." Emanuel's spokesman responded, in part tweeting, "Chicago is a Trump-free zone, not a fact-free zone, and we had a 21% drop in gun violence in 2017 and a 21% drop in 2018. Still, the number of people murdered in Chicago this year is nearly as high as New York and LA combined. And despite 1,000 additional officers added to the streets as part of a special summer unit, the city of Chicago just witnessed another bloody Memorial Day weekend. 7 people were killed and 29 people were shot, deadlier than the same weekend last year, when 6 people were killed but nearly twice as many shot. Despite the deadly holiday weekend, Chicago police are reporting 53 fewer murders year to date compared to the same time last year. Police attribute the decrease to a focus on community policing and ShotSpotter technology that instantly alerts police to gunshots and allows them to track offenders in real time with 30,000 cameras. Still, Chicago's top cop continues to call for stronger sentencing for repeat offenders.
I won't be happy until we have 0 murders and 0 shootings, but there was some progress made, so I am happy about that.
Mayor Rahm Emanuel and the Chicago police superintendent successfully lobbied for a state bill that's aimed at cracking down on repeat gun offenders and will require judges to publicly reveal why they chose not to give strict sentences. It went into effect this year. Brett?
Matt Finn in Chicago. Matt, thanks. The U.S. Commerce Department says the U.S. economy grew at a 2.2% rate during the first 3 months of the year. That is down 1/10 of a percentage point from an earlier estimate. Experts blame a slowdown in consumer spending. Well, stocks were up today. The Dow gained a big 306. The S&P 500 finished ahead 34. The Nasdaq jumped 66. Breaking right now, Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein has been indicted on rape and criminal sex act charges. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office says it brings the former movie mogul another step closer to accountability. The indictment came hours after Weinstein's lawyers said that he had decided not to testify before the grand jury there. Weinstein faces rape and criminal sex acts charges involving 2 women in New York. The 66-year-old has consistently denied all allegations of non-consensual sex. Up next, we'll take a look at President Trump's revamped strategy for dealing with the Taliban in Afghanistan. First, beyond our borders tonight, top European officials are holding last-ditch talks with the U.S. commerce and trade chiefs just 2 days before the Trump administration decides whether to hit Europe with punishing new tariffs. Potential taxes on European steel or quotas on foreign cars have raised threats of retaliation and fears of a global trade war. A general strike in Greece against plans to extend austerity measures has halted ferry services to the island and disrupted flights, public transport, and other services. The 24-hour strike called by the country's largest unions also closed schools and left public hospitals running on emergency staff there. Prosecutors in Belgium say the man who killed 4 people yesterday carried out an act of terrorist murder. They say Benjamin Herman likely intended to cause more carnage before he was killed by police. An ISIS group claims Herman was a soldier of the caliphate. Prosecutors are trying to establish whether he acted alone. They say Herman yelled the familiar Allah Akbar several times during that rampage. Just some of the other stories beyond our borders tonight. We'll be right back. The Taliban has been busy the last several hours. A suicide bombing outside the Afghan Interior Ministry and attacks on 2 other security installations left at least 9 victims dead. Tonight, national security correspondent Jennifer Griffin looks at the president's revamped strategy in that country and whether it's working.
U.S. Marines killed more than 50 Taliban leaders in an artillery strike last week in Helmand province. The top commander in Afghanistan cautiously touted a success.
You know, Helmand's been the financial engine of the insurgency. The Taliban draws 60% of their revenue from narcotics. Criminal activity.
A Taliban spokesman said none of its leaders were killed, calling this U.S. propaganda. Today marked the first time General John Nicholson has spoken to the Pentagon press in 6 months.
By killing leaders, we will achieve a disruptive effect in Helmand.
Last month, the U.S. military launched the second largest number of airstrikes in the past 6.5 years, more than 500 airstrikes in April alone. Recently, U.S. drones killed dozens of Taliban fighters attempting to take over western Farah province, which borders Iran. In January, A-10 Warthog jets, which fly close air support, arrived in Kandahar province to provide more cover for Afghan troops. Over the past several months, dozens of drug labs have been destroyed. But Taliban-led attacks remain a real threat. Today, Afghan security thwarted an attempted suicide bombing at the Interior Ministry in Kabul.
The Afghan guards immediately recognized these as old uniforms, called on the terrorists to exit the vehicle so they could be checked out, and at that point the fighting started.
General Nicholson's tour is coming to an end later this year. Lieutenant General Scott Miller, who currently heads U.S. Joint Special Operations Command, will take over. He will be the 9th U.S. general in 17 years overseeing the Afghan war.
Brett.
Jennifer Griffin at the Pentagon. Jennifer, thank you. Palestinian rulers in Gaza say they have agreed to a ceasefire with Israel. It's supposed to end the largest flare-up of violence between the two sides since 2014. Senior Hamas official says militant groups in Gaza will commit to the deal as long as Israel does. Hamas has repeatedly disregarded previous agreements as attacks have continued on Israel. The Israeli military struck dozens of terrorist sites in Gaza overnight as rocket fire continued to come from Gaza towards southern Israeli communities. The jailing of a right-wing activist in Britain is prompting protests there and in many other countries. President Trump's son, Donald Trump Jr., says it's the kind of thing that led to Brexit. Tonight, correspondent Ellison Barber has the story.
Over 500,000 people have signed a Change.org petition calling for Britain to free right-wing activist Tommy Robinson. People are protesting. Even President Trump's son is tweeting about Robinson's arrest. Robinson is known as anti-Muslim, a far-right provocateur. Last week, police arrested and ultimately charged him with contempt of court after he live-streamed video on social media outside of a trial reportedly related to sex trafficking.
You've all watched this.
Robinson recorded himself talking about the case and confronting people he said were defendants. He pled guilty and a judge sentenced him to 10 months in prison plus 3 months for violating the terms of a previous suspended sentence. In the UK, there are laws that prohibit reporting on some active cases. The judge told Robinson his actions could lead to a retrial and potentially cost taxpayers millions of pounds. To some, Robinson's arrest is nonsense.
In the United States, when the court system thinks there might be some problem with people prejudicing the outcome of a trial because of reporting on it, we solve that by sequestering jurors, by instructing jurors that you're only supposed to consider the evidence presented to you in court.
Others say rules are rules. In an article posted online, a BBC correspondent writes, "This is not some new form of censorship directed at Robinson. These are rules that apply to us all equally. If he is unsure about that, he's now got time on his hands to read a copy of Essential Law for Journalists." Reporting on Robinson's arrest was initially banned. The judge lifted court-ordered reporting restrictions on Tuesday after a group of journalists challenged them. Brett?
Ellison, thank you. A top Republican congressman says the FBI did the right thing, having an informant in or around the Trump campaign. We'll talk about it with the panel when we come back.
Chris Wray and Rod Rosenstein have at least made it clear to us Donald Trump was never the target of the investigation. He's not the current target of the investigation. Now, keep in mind, that can all change depending on what a witness says. I am even more convinced that the FBI did exactly what my fellow citizens would want them to do when they got the information they got, and that it has nothing to do with Donald Trump.
Let's not forget that the deputy director of the FBI was actually fired for misconduct. The president's concerned about the matter, and we're going to continue to follow the issue.
Okay, so Trey Gowdy is one of the people who has seen the documents. He's read them. He's also been briefed in the classified briefing and is saying that he doesn't have a problem with what the FBI did as far as an informant in or around the Trump campaign. Here's the president last night.
So how do you like the fact they had people infiltrating our campaign? Can you imagine?
It was President Trump himself who said, number one, I didn't collude with Russia, but if anyone connected with my campaign did, I want the FBI to find that out.
What worries me beyond the Russians themselves or the collusion issue, but the president's willingness to kind of make broad-based ad hominem attacks against the whole integrity of the FBI.
So what about this and where we stand and the Attorney General Sessions comments, all of it? Let's bring in our panel. Byron York, Chief Political Correspondent of the Washington Examiner. A.B. Stoddard, Associate Editor at Real Clear Politics. And Guy Benson, Political Editor, townhall.com. Also on radio with Marie Harf, who I guess right now is holding down the fort.
She is.
Okay. Your thoughts on Trey Gowdy and what this means for the investigation?
Well, I think we have to pay very close attention to what Trey Gowdy is saying because he has extraordinary
access to actual information about this. We all chatter about it and speculate all day and all night, but he knows more than 99.99% of us do because he's seen actual documents. So when he comes out and says this was an appropriately predicated investigation and the informant within the Trump campaign was not a spy or acting inappropriately in any way, I think that matters. And many in the media are seizing on that element of his interview with Martha MacCallum. But the quote also to me that sticks out, he said, quote, "It has nothing to do with Donald Trump himself." That is significant. If Gowdy's saying if there was this informant, which there was, what he was examining was not targeting the president, that matters.
Byron, that's true. I mean, as you look at the coverage around the horn, the second part really got chopped off all day today.
First part got ignored. The second part, I think there are a couple of reasons to explain this. One, Trey Gowdy, as a federal prosecutor, I think has more trust in the Justice Department than Devin Nunes does. I think it's pretty clear there.
We should point out that we haven't heard from Devin Nunes. He was correct. Out and about and talking a lot until that briefing.
And he has not talked about the briefing. There are other people who are in the briefing who have not talked about it as well. He is not the only one. But I think the important thing to remember is the House was trying to get documents about this informant. They were trying to say, for example, did the informant give reports to the Justice Department? If the informant talked to George Papadopoulos, did he write it up? Did he give it to the Justice Department? The fact is they haven't seen that stuff yet. So the Justice Department can say we followed all the rules, everything's great, don't worry about